Aloha and welcome to episode 28 of That Time I Got Arrested. So, here is a real life in time update of me, yours truly. I am so fucked in the head right now. It's hilarious. I am taking a little break from just about everything, and I'm like trying to work through some stuff that's really difficult for me right now. So light and love to all of you. Please return it ×3 because I could certainly use it right now. So stay tuned for this episode. This was not easy to record, and my producer has a hell of a job editing this one. So if it sounds even remotely good, that's all him. Please contact Jazz Fuzz Studios if you have an idea for a podcast, because the only reason you like me is due to his Edward Scissorhands. So submit to That Time I Got Arrested at gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram or iTunes. Subscribe and tell your friends. And while you're at it, leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. I would really appreciate it, and it would honestly help me so much right now. Stick around for this episode. It's weird. This is strange. People are strange. People are so strange, and fuck everyone except you, because you are my friend and you're listening to this. I love you. My name is B. Casper, and my entire life has been a lie. That's not even my real name. But don't worry, I'm going to tell you all of my secrets. This isn't the story of how I became an orphan. This isn't the story about how I jumped off a 5-story building and survived. This isn't about how I died and came back funny. This is That Time I Got Arrested. My grandfather taught me how to play chess, and he was really into crossword puzzles. He would do them in the ones that came in the newspaper, and he was really good at it. And that was kind of like the thing that we would do at the kitchen table is we'd sit and he would have a crossword and he would say, you know, like some descriptive word and then how many letters it had, and like if it started or ended with anything. And then we'd all try and like figure it out. That was like our little, you know, wholesome routine that we engaged in. It was weird because it was like those kinds of experiences with my grandmother and my grandfather are the only reason I can even pretend to be normal in front of other people. Because when I'm in front of people that are not, you know, aware of like my life and my circumstances and my trauma, or if it's like someone that I work with or someone that I have to be professional around, I can completely act like I am one of them. You know, I'm basically like an imposter in a crowd, because you would mostly, for the most part, unless you really spent, you know, more than a while talking to me, unless I was like trying to mislead you, you know, you can tell eventually, like you can see where all the cracks are and like where I'm like slipping, you know. My grandfather, Gary, is a Norwegian man that grew up on a farm in Wisconsin, and he was the eldest of 3. He had 2 younger sisters, and he was pretty fond of taking care of them and sort of, you know, like he was really into being a big brother. He went into the military when he was very young. He joined the Navy and he flew planes and then eventually became an officer in the Navy. After that, he went to Yale and he was a singer for the Whiffenpoofs, which is like a cappella men's group that walks women to their dorms to safety by singing them like beautiful songs. So he wanted to be a journalist, and he has like the heart and the soul of an artist, but he started having kids pretty young. He got married 3 times. My grandmother was his 3rd wife. And, you know, our family is like a blended family of like kids from other marriages and my grandmother and grandfather coming together and like having a kid of their own. So like we have like a lot of step siblings and like half brothers and sisters, and even one of my uncles is actually adopted. So he was really into like being a dad, just like he was into being an older brother. He's such a fucking cool guy. He listens to records and he's into making things. He just makes all kinds of beautiful sculptures and works of art. He got into software and like became like a businessman. He went to Purdue for grad school eventually. And, you know, he always said that he was good at making money and my grandmother was good at saving it. So like they were like a team. They are the reason why I'm able to even pretend like I'm a normal person in front of other people. They gave me stability and an education, and the only difference between me and a lot of the women that I met in prison and their circumstances was I had rich grandparents who were willing to pay for me to be okay somewhere. And even if that wasn't with them, they always, always, always did the most that they could to take care of my mother and take care of me and make sure that we weren't like living on the street or in some desperate situation as we would often find ourselves in. They were always there to bail us out. So my grandfather was really into crossword puzzles and chess. He taught me how to play chess, and every day he would read the newspaper and he would do the crossword puzzle at the kitchen table. And that was kind of like our, bonding experiences. He would, say the description for a word and how many letters were in it, and we would all try and like figure it out together. So when I was in prison, he would send me the crossword. He'd send me the New York Times crossword puzzle, and he would write little notes in the margins, and he would do half of the puzzle and I would do the other half. And so, every day I would get mail of a newspaper, and like that was kind of unusual in prison, in a women's prison especially, because a lot of those women weren't interested or even aware of like the news in that way, even to like keep up with it, but to read a newspaper even more so. In prison, they do this thing twice a day called count, where everyone has to sit on their bunks and they have to be completely silent, and the guards walk through every single dorm and then they count you to make sure that every prisoner is actually in prison still. And let me let you in on how the ranking in a prison system goes as follows. First, there's a correctional officer, then there's a senior officer, then a senior officer specialist, then a lieutenant, then there's a lieutenant who's like the shift leader of the lieutenants, then you have a deputy captain, a captain, an assistant warden, and a warden. So the person this episode is about is a captain at the prison. So he's basically like the third in command of like the whole show. And he would walk by as we were going through count, and he would see me, reading the newspaper and doing the crossword puzzle. And it's funny because this guy was old enough to be my grandfather. And looking back, what I think that he found the most interesting about me was all of the things that had an impression on me directly due to my grandfather. So as I'm telling you this story, realize that he doesn't even really like me, this like 20-something-year-old girl. What he really likes is my eldest grandfather, who raised me and who had a profound impact on my personality and my ability to adapt to situations that called for it. So I could have conversations with men who are in their 60s and really get on their level because I had a profound influence of someone of that age and that sort of mindset. He liked me, and he would sort of flirt with me in an old-fashioned way. He would, smile at me. He would whistle at me. He would wink at me. And one day he sent like a hall pass, basically, calling me down into his office. Also, at this point, I feel like I'm not even really a person anymore. I'm just sort of like a secret agent or a spy or someone who's like a refugee that's trying to cross enemy lines. I'm just trying to get from one moment to the next. I'm just trying to go down the path of least resistance. And after I had experienced a lot of violence and brutalization in maximum security prison and just my whole time while I was in jail, I really did whatever I had to do to get through it and to make it better. I was like, based on everything that had already happened, I was nervous about what could happen. You know, like I had that experience with that other guard that I played chess with. So I was definitely on the defense and I was scared. So I played along as best I could because I didn't know how that was going to shake out for me in the long run, you know? So he called me down to his office and we would talk about news and politics and current events. And we would have these sort of like long debates back and forth. And he'd call me Casper, and he really thought that I was unique or special or interesting or whatever. And it was like a slow build, you know. Sometimes he would walk around the office and he would lift my hair, you know, above my neck, and he'd like blow on the back of my neck, or he'd like whisper something close to my ear. And I would just sit there and try not to involuntarily have a chill, you know. And then he would sit on the edge of his desk and he would hand me pieces of candy. And pretty soon he would sit in my chair and he would have me sit on his lap. And then he would hand me pieces of Starburst that were in a wrapper, and he would have me put them in my mouth and have me unwrap them with my tongue. And then I would spit the candy out and he would eat it. And it was weird because what I think ultimately was keeping me safe from more, you know, like brutal experiences with him was just the fact that he was so much older. He was probably near the age of my grandfather. And I think that he had a sort of old school mindset where maybe he had taken a shining towards me, but he wanted me to like reciprocate. He wanted me to like him back. So he had power and he made my experiences in prison ultimately better. You know, he kept the guards away from me. He made my life easier in some ways, and he only wanted, I don't know what he wanted in return. As soon as he started showing like favor towards me, you know, it didn't prevent me from getting beat up by the girls, but like the guards did not harass me in the same way. So it was like I was like marked. I was his, you know, I belonged to him. So I was his little plaything. So it was like the other guards respected that. We did this little song and dance for a while, but there was a specific day where it all fell apart. One time we were just having a normal, you know, tete-a-tete where we do, you know, the candy and the lap sitting and the circling and the neck blowing. And I think that maybe he knew that I was like going to leave soon, and I hadn't given him what he wanted yet. I remember it was like a Thursday. It was a balmy afternoon. It was maybe about 2 weeks before my like initial release date. So after this, my parole site changed at the last minute and I ended up having to stay for 3 more months. But there was a point in time where I thought that I only had about 2 weeks left. And he was sort of, you know, commenting on this and saying how it was kind of a shame that we didn't get to know each other longer. And I thought that that was such a fucking psychotic thing to say. Like, I would ever dream, or like anyone would ever wish for me to spend another day in that fucking hellhole. And then he came over to me and he leaned down across the chair and he put his hands on one of the arms. And he looked me in the eye and he just told me that it was like such a pleasure getting to know me so well. And I think that that was like the same moment where, you know, the other guard had tried to kiss me and I made a face. And this guy I had spent like, you know, upwards of 30 hours having like long conversations with. And I just looked him in the eye and we basically had like a staring contest. And I think that he like wanted me to kiss him. And I just sat there with a poker face, someone who had been hardened and broken and didn't really have like anything left to lose. Or so I thought, you know, I thought I didn't have anything left to lose. And so I'm staring at him dead in the eye, you know, calling his bluff, like, what are you going to do about it? You know, by this time I knew that he was a weirdo, but he wasn't necessarily violent, you know, not directly. He wasn't directly violent. So we stared at each other for what seemed like an eternity. And then he got up pretty swiftly and turned around, like very military-like, and said, "All right, that's it. Thank you." And then I was sort of dismissed from that point, and I didn't receive any other passes to his office after that. In fact, then everything fell apart. Then my parole site changed, and Dr. Evil said that I had to wait 3 months to get a new one approved. So now I'm stuck there for another fucking 90 days. And the captain has sort of relieved his protection of me. So now I was fair game for the guards at this point. I mean, I don't always make decisions in my best interest. Sometimes I just make decisions based off of how the fuck I'm feeling in that moment, even if it means sacrificing something small in order to receive something much, much bigger. So I could have just kissed him in that moment. I could have just given him what he wanted, but I couldn't. You know, like I actually like couldn't, or like I could have, but I didn't. I didn't. So I didn't realize how much he was doing for me at that point. So one time, shortly after, now I'm like stuck in prison for another 90 days. Now I'm sort of like fucked in a sense because I've got 90 days left and I've got like no protection. I was coming out of the shower and a guard came towards me in a very familiar way. Like I knew exactly what he wanted just by the way that he was like walking. And I was holding all of my stuff and I was half naked and I just went nuts. I mean, I had arms full and I was like expecting to sort of get like bent over. And instead I just kicked the guard. I kicked the correctional officer on his face. And I got into a lot of trouble. He got like a bloody nose and he said, "Ow." And then I wasn't about to like get into a fight with him, but I think that he saw like the wild look in my eyes because I had like fallen over after I had kicked him because he like went to backhand me and I like scooted away and I fell over and I was sort of like crawling on the ground and I'm like half naked and there are like, you know, people around me at this point. This isn't Max where everyone's locked in a cell. Now we're in a big dorm, so it's like they can't be as blatant as they were in other prisons. So he just came towards me and instead of continuing what he was trying to do, he radioed and had like 4 guards come and hold me down and take me to solitaire. And so our next episode will be about my week in solitary confinement. Bon voyage!